From the very first teaser trailer, Master Sol, and we saw this in the first 2 episodes of the show, tells the younglings to not trust their eyes.
Your eyes can deceive you.
And I think we've misunderstood the fact it's Leslye Headland telling us, the audience, the same thing. Now, I've been thinking a lot about the twins, Osha and May, and I went back to listen to interviews with Leslye Headland and some of the comments she made about the influences on the show. And so today, I want to share with you the most daring theory I have for it. I will put a disclaimer saying it's very likely to be wrong, and you might say I'm absolutely insane for saying it. It relies on the fact there is a deep connection between the twins, one which could be a Force Dyad, but goes beyond this, one they're going to reveal in the next few episodes. But more than anything, it relies on something enormous. And hear me out, May is dead. And what we're seeing with the 2 characters is Osha and her alter ego. Whether it's to do with a spiritual connection and May lives on through Osha physically, or May is an alter ego which somehow comes alive when Osha is asleep, it's very hard to quantify. And there are lots of holes in this theory. Osha being on the way to Olega when May was already there, that kind of thing. But also keep in mind, the editing, as we're going to touch upon in this video, as well as the sequence of events, cannot be trusted to be linear. There are a lot of holes in this theory, overlapping scenes in the first 2 episodes which take place at the same time, but it also does have its merits. But just entertain me for this video, and hear me out. I sat down with our good friend Matt Rissman to discuss this theory in depth, because if there is some truth to it, it explains some of the unevenness, the clunkiness, but also could allude to the biggest plot twist in recent Star Wars history. Let's dive in.
There are some things about how we've seen Osha behave in the first couple of episodes that are making me believe that some of this we may be seeing from her point of view, and some of it may not be exactly the way it's being shown to us on the screen. I haven't quite worked it out yet. Something about the way she's been interacting with the other characters and some of the things they've said, what I think I may be attributing to some clunky dialogue may be very purposeful, and I'm starting to wonder, are there really twins? Is there just one person somehow that's having experiences as 2 different people? I don't know. There's just something about it there that I feel like isn't as surface level as they've led to believe, which would make sense if people are saying, well, they spoiled the whole twin thing very early. And now I'm starting to wonder, did they really? Maybe they didn't.
I'm right there with you. And it wasn't until my second rewatch I thought, imagine if they're trying to mess with us. Because the thing that really stood out to me is that a lot of the first episode has Osha waking up in a panic. And I think there's more to it than just her dreams, just her past. And we were talking about Fight Club. Leslye Headland had the cast and crew watch Fight Club before this series, and the big twist is, of course, that the alter ego is not a separate character.
This is exactly right. And on your point of her waking up, one of the things that I thought was silly at first, when she crashes, she straps herself in, she crashes on the planet, then she comes to and she's sort of laying in one place. And my first thought was, well, how'd she get unstrapped, right? She was strapped in pretty good. They made it a very big point of showing how she was strapped in, right? So she's laying in one place. Then she seems to have a vision and something happens. And then I'm positive she comes to again and she's laying somewhere else entirely. Right? So this is where I'm like, if you go back and look at it a little bit differently, like at the beginning where the guy was like, well, we missed you last night. Where were you at? Right? We went out and we partied. We partied at the Hut Planet, right? Where you missed a good time. But then I thought to myself, well, the time period right before then, wasn't that when Indira died?
Do you remember when Master Sol tells the Padawans, or the younglings rather, close your eyes can deceive you, is what we're attributing, as you say, to bad dialogue and clunkiness. The fact that we can't trust the POV, the point of view a lot of the show is from, because perhaps, I don't know if Osha and May are just one person, or some of the events don't take place at the same time. A problem with the theory. Why did Qimir say, you look just like her?
So on this point, previous to him saying that, he said, remember, she found him and he said something like, where were you? I waited all night for you. Right? There was something else about that dialogue. And then I think in that same set of dialogue, right, isn't that when he sort of sidled up to her weirdly and he's like, you look just like her. I'm wondering if he's if he knows or has realized that she's sort of presenting the multiple personalities or whatever we're going to call this thing for now. And so that was his way of saying, you're one person, or you're, you know what I mean? You're two people in one, or there's something weird here with not only their relationship, but that comment. And also I think Sol has figured it out. I think, again, I attributed this to bad dialogue, but remember, he's on the ship and he's talking to Jackie, right? And he's like, well, I saw one of the twins die. So I do think at some point there were twins, clearly. But he's like, I saw, and she's like, well, there wasn't even any mention of twins, and he just doesn't say anything. And then we fast forward a little bit, not really that much longer, right? And Osha is about to fall and he grabs her and she says, I didn't do it. And he says, I believe you. I think he's figured it out, or maybe he's known all along. Maybe this is why it didn't work out for her at the Jedi Temple. I think he knows.
It's interesting you said that last bit, because I'm starting to think we're not told the reason she left. And if you pay attention, it's almost like Master Sol feels sorry for her because she can't help it. Maybe her trauma is remembering her twin, who was very much a separate person. But in this whole scenario, we have to wonder if, when she sees May in the little speeder and she's got the pistol pointed at her, May looks at her and says, Oshi. And I'm wondering, is she really seeing that, or is that like a Dagobah moment?
This is it exactly. And by the way, the tattoo, right? We went to the tattoo as this is going to be how we tell both of them apart. At least I did. The conversation that Sol has with her about the tattoo. Oh, what's that? And she says, I got it in such and such a place. And she's like, I don't like it. And his comment was, it doesn't matter what I like. I almost wonder, again, if we play this out further, maybe she got the tattoo as May and now she wears it as Osha. You know what I'm saying? There's something more to that, I think. At face value, the dialogue is just weird.
So just to poke a hole or two into the theory, how would we explain the Master Torbin sequence where on the outside you have Osha, Yord, Jecki and Sol, and on the inside you've got May and Torbin? Are those events concurrent? And how do we explain the fact that Yord saw Osha and can account for the fact that she didn't kill Torbin?
It's a tough one for me. I'm starting to believe the only way some of this works, the speeder may be another example of this, is there we also have a concurrency problem, right? One of my issues, it's so funny because a lot of my issues we're hitting on now, right? The dialogue, I'm going to talk about the editing, right? Some of it seems edited weirdly. Now I'm wondering if my perception of the editing being weird is because they've stitched this together very purposefully for concurrency and other diversionary reasons. But the it's not quite hitting exactly the way they're intending. So there's some weirdness, but you do have to suspend some disbelief, I think, on concurrency. And is it really happening the way we think it is? Or is it just, are we seeing it as she's seeing it or replaying it in her mind? I'm not sure.
There are some fans who'll say we're crazy, but I urge everyone to go back and watch the first 2 episodes with this theory in mind. There are moments where you might say it doesn't work, May killing Indara, but then take into account the very next scene, she jumps up awake in a shock. This isn't the first time movies or TV have done this, where a character has an alter ego born out of trauma. I don't know if you've seen the film Split, and the person in the spotlight doesn't actually understand the other personalities can do things through the vessel of one person, but they can't account for those actions. Was it Yord or Jecki who said, it's not in her file that she was a twin, and that's something the Jedi Order would have absolutely noted. In Legends and in canon, famous Jedi, is this going to cause an issue with attachments?
I think we're going to find out. I don't know how I feel about this. Well, maybe I do know how I feel about this, but I think we're going to find out maybe very soon, actually. However the witches interpret and use the Force in their coven has something to do with what's happening now with Osha and May and Force essence, personalities, whatever we're going to call this thing. I think the 4 Jedi who were just simply looking for Force-sensitive children encountered this coven, and became very disquieted with the way they were using the Force and everything they were doing. And in their opinion, it was such a perversion that I believe the Jedi slaughtered that village of witches. And also, I think the witches partially inhabited Torbin, and that's why Kelnaka and Torbin were fighting, and different things happened. But I'm starting to believe that the Jedi were just so, like, we can't let the people that use the Force this way continue on, because we know what the Force is and how the Force should be used, and this is definitely not it. I'm starting to think that maybe they led to the demise of the village, and Sol and Indira maybe took Osha away from there as not penance, but out of responsibility.
So I've got to ask you, who is the masked Sith?
Oh, this is so hard. When I watched your video from today also, I wanted to believe for a while that it was Qimir, right? But now I'm starting to be on the side of the Osha May dynamic, whether there's one or two of them, I'm not sure, right? But let's just say May for now. May is the Acolyte. I'm starting to think that Qimir might be the apprentice, and that the actual master is someone we've yet to encounter. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Now, you mentioned speculation about Kelnaka and perhaps meeting his end soon, which I do think is going to be the case. It's a little bit unclear to me actually who kills him. And I think when we get some clarity as to that, it might help us answer this question a little bit better.
I watched the interview with Jodie Turner-Smith from Star Wars Celebration. She said something which had no context in 2023, but now we can see what she said and apply it to the show. Her character had to make a very difficult choice, and that choice was one path of fate or another.
I think it will be interesting for us to see when we're presented with the flashback of the village and what happens and the aftermath. I'll be curious to see how they present both May and Mother Anastasia specifically being dead, right? And if we see them as dead, can we figure out now through whose eyes are we seeing it? Because we have heard Sol say that he believed everyone to be dead, including May. Right, but I'm curious to see how they're going to represent that now in the episode, and whether or not it lends any credibility that it could be Anastasia, or I suppose the other coven leader, who I understand she and Anastasia somehow both have a hand, right, in the genesis of the twins. So it could, I guess, be either one of them. But I think the prevailing theory has been it's Jodie Turner-Smith's character, right? So that would be Anastasia. But how are we going to evaluate the fact that they are dead? And do we believe it?
It's very interesting because it's all about perspective. And I think that's where Star Wars TV kind of needs more of an abstract touch. So I'm hoping that could be the savior for the Acolyte. All of the mystery is solved. But then you start going into multiple layers of depth and you start to see maybe Osha and May are not two people. I think at one point they were. We're going to see this flashback. But at some point I think May died, and now lives spiritually through Osha. And remember there was that poem, how the two are one. They're alluding to some kind of Force Dyad. But even Leslye Headland said, you can't trust everything in the show. She said, everything you think the Acolyte is, it's not.
I think for some people that will be very agreeable, and I think for some other people that might be very disagreeable, right? But I keep going back to Leslye and others, primarily Leslye, saying everything you think this series is, it's not. Right. And again, Russian Doll and these other things that they keep coming back to that have multiple layers of complexity. Clearly, the mystery is who's under the mask. Perhaps a mystery was that there was twins to begin with. Again, you could argue that wasn't much of a mystery as soon as they put out the poster. But okay, it's a surface level mystery, right? Another mystery is what did the Jedi do? Right? Did they do anything? Were they a catalyst? Why are they guilty? Right? What did the Jedi do? Now I think we're hitting on something that no one potentially ever anticipated, which is what was really the outcome of that witch coven from being destroyed? How did it impact Osha? And what exactly are we seeing play out before our eyes when we see Osha and May ostensibly separately in this series?
And to your point, I do think there were twins. the flashbacks are real, but they're already showing us that we can't trust everything Osha is seeing. It'll be interesting because I don't think we can completely debunk the theory, but it does have holes.
I'm with you, and I think the most unfortunate thing is going to be we probably won't get confirmation that we're right or wrong until the very end.
But I also think of the Netflix, or I saw it on Netflix, the movie The Vanished. Did you see that movie? It's very much like this, as you say, the reveal is at the end. Essentially, two parents with their daughter go on holiday. Day one, the daughter goes missing, and the whole thing is like trying to figure out who kidnapped the daughter. You're blaming the guy at the kiosk in the shop, and the girl died years ago, and this was the parents' way of dealing with the trauma of letting her go. And I'm starting to think, is that what we're seeing in the Acolyte? Osha and May were two distinct twins. May did die, but Osha, through a Force Dyad or whatever else, is embodying both in some capacity, and that's the twist.